Hey Deckers, Hellblade 2 is here and it's definitely playable on the Steam Deck, but whether you want to play it on the deck or not is definitely going to be a matter of preference. Now, as you can see here, especially during some of the cutscenes, we're down into the 20 FPS range, and for some reason they have a really weird aspect ratio of this 239, which means we have major black bars throughout the gameplay, and if we do put it out to 16:9, it would look absolutely fine, but for some reason they went with this really cinematic view. Now, with no UI, it definitely feels like you are playing a video rather than a game a lot of the time, and sometimes I've just forgotten to press things because I've just been immersed in the story and forget to actually do something. But settings wise, it is a little bit disappointing, although we do have full HDR support, and at least we can turn it off on this one, which makes recording a lot simpler. FSR 3 balance is definitely where I'm going to be recommending this, with the low preset and capping the Steam Deck at 30 FPS. By default, it goes with TSR and tries to target 30 frames per second with the dynamic resolution, which fails miserably. Although it does look absolutely gorgeous with TSR, this Steam Deck just can't handle it, pushing barely 20 frames per second, even with it trying with that dynamic frame rate, which only goes down to 90 on the render scale for some reason, so it is pretty useless. But if we could run this with TSR on the deck, it does look absolutely gorgeous. XeSS for some reason isn't implemented as well as we've seen in other areas, and for some reason XeSS just gives a lot of blur in this one. Although there is a little bit less artifacting, the blur really is quite annoying, and we really do see some jaggedness around the character, especially in movement, where it really just ruins the picture quality for me on this one. So unfortunately, I'm not going to recommend XeSS. Even on quality, the blur is quite substantial, as well as the hit on the frames per second as well. Now, you can run FSR 3 quality mode, although the dip on the FPS is just a little bit too much once again, and that's why I do say to stick with the FSR 3 balance if you are going to slug it out on the deck. Now, this may come with a few updates to make it a little bit more efficient, but I don't think it's going to do a lot, as I believe this is a fully Unreal Engine 5 game and really is quite a tech showcase for how good games can look in future. But this is definitely pushing the limits of the Steam Deck. So FSR 3 balanced, cap it at 30 frames per second on the deck if you do want to slug your way through this. And I will be completely honest, it is doable, although it does dip into those mid-20s in a fair amount of occasions. It's cinematic enough that you're not going to have your gameplay absolutely ruined. Now, in other areas, it does hold over 30 frames per second, and the combat is few and far between. But when we do get into those combat scenarios, we do tend to stick around the 30 to 35 frames per second mark for the most part. So it does mean that combat is playable. And because you're immersed in trying to survive a lot of the time, as well as all of the kind of conversations that are going on in your head and in the background, you're not going to be looking at that frames per second too much when it comes to it. Now, unfortunately, the FSR 3 does still bring in some artifacting, especially in some of the areas where we are looking for symbols, which can be a little bit frustrating. But overall, the ghosting isn't too bad, and FSR 3 definitely seems to be a better implementation with that sharpening around 30 to 50 without being a major impact on the actual quality overall. On the OLED, this is running around 22-23 watts, so you are only going to get about 2.5 hours gameplay at the most, and LCD you're probably going to be pushing a good 26-27 watts, meaning an hour and a half tops. Let us know if you're going to be hoping this one hits either something like GeForce NOW, or you're going to be playing this on the Xbox or PC via Game Pass, or whether you're just going to wait for some patches or give this one a miss completely. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.